Dialogue with a Doctor, featuring Southwest Florida's leading physicians.
Welcome to Dialogue with a Doctor. We're here this show with Dr. Raymond Phillips, a practicing gastroenterologist in Naples, Florida. He is with the Gastroenterology Group of Naples, and we welcome you back, Dr. Phillips. He's been with us before. Today we're going to be talking about the microbiome of the gut, which is new to a lot of people, and it seems to be a holy grail of research right now, and a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding. So we're going to hear some real information tonight. Welcome, Dr. Phillips.
Oh, thanks so much.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm a board-certified gastroenterologist, and what that means is that I went to college. I went to Princeton University on an Army ROTC scholarship, and after graduating from Princeton, I went to medical school at Washington University in St. Louis, and then I did my internal medicine training at Jefferson Hospital for 3 years. I was chief resident for a 4th year, and then I went on active duty in the Army and was assigned to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri as an internist for 2 years. And then I was selected for gastroenterology training at Walter Reed, was there for 2 years. Then I was on staff for an additional 2 years doing research at Walter Reed. And then after I concluded my my Army stint, if you will, I came on down to Naples, and I've been practicing here for these years. And my practice currently, I'm working with Dr. Susan Libersky, Dr. Michael Marks, as well as Dr. Gustavo Rivera. And we have offices in Bonita as well as Marco, but our principal office is in Naples, in downtown Naples, in Colonial Square. So the issue of the microbiome is one that is a hot topic, if you will, and it's captured the attention of the public as well as science in particular, and represents a great change in terms of our understanding, and it's an evolving understanding. And so even though we had touched on this on a previous show where we had talked about the treatment of Clostridia difficile and the microbiome, I felt like it'd be worthwhile to devote an entire show or two to talk about it, so we can have an understanding of it and explore some of the intricacies, and as well as try to provide a foundation for people to evaluate information as it's published in newspapers or other media sources, so they can really understand and follow this new sort of research.
So my patients, when I talk to them about the microbiome, they don't know what that is. What is the microbiome?
Well, the microbiome refers to the bacterial population within the large intestine, or the colon. And the formal name is called microbiota, which refers to the bacterial population. And the genes that make up the microbiota are called microbiome, which is similar to the terminology of genome for the human body. But it's easier to say microbiome than it is to say microbiota. So we prefer the term. The term generally microbiome has been used to refer to the bacterial population within the large intestine or colon. But what a lot of people don't realize is that it's not just bacteria that exists within your colon. You know, there's a huge population of viruses as well, different types of viruses, viruses that can infect people, viruses that infect other bacteria. There's a huge number of yeast and molds and fungi as well. So I think rather than thinking of it as a large number of bacteria, and I'm talking large numbers here, and I'll go into that in just a moment, I think people should regard the microbiota within your large intestine or colon as being an ecosystem, if you will. You know, if you think of a rainforest, you have the plants, the animals, the insect life all working together, and I think that would be the sort of best analogy to provide for considering the microbiota. And when I talk in numbers, these are like astronomical numbers, and it's sometimes very extraordinarily difficult to have an understanding of this. And gosh, in just a small amount of material from your colon, a small amount of stool, like a gram of it, you got a trillion cells, a trillion bacteria with and then collectively within your colon you have 100 trillion cells. In your entire body. So you got 100 trillion bacteria in your colon, but you only got 1 trillion human cells so they outnumber us. And the other aspect is there's a great number of genes that are present, the microbiome. And so it's just so these bacteria and these ecosystems, they do things and they produce things and they interact with us. And for years we had some limited understanding of what these bacteria do in terms of producing certain vitamins like vitamin B and K and providing certain nutrients for us that would meet about 15% of our caloric requirement. So the fermentation action of bacteria within the colon actually provide a nutritional source for us, meeting about 15% of our caloric requirements.
You mean the fermentation changes what you're putting in, making it available to absorb and burn?
Well, yeah, and to elaborate, when you eat food, the stomach processes the food, it's delivered to the small intestine, and what occurs is you extract nutrition from that food. And at that point, the remaining material arrives in the large intestine. Now, that material that arrives in the large intestine, there's no really nutrition that's remaining there that has not yet been extracted. But the bacteria can ferment that material, break it down further into other components that then can be absorbed as a nutritional source. So it breaks down, very much like ruminants, like cows and so forth. They take in grass. They have they have 4 stomachs, and those each of those stomachs prepare and then ferment the grass and break it down into its individual components, carbohydrates, a sugar, that can then be a nutritional source for the cow. Now, humans are not capable of doing what cows can do, take grass and extract nutrition, but we can, to a limited extent, ferment material, and that fermentation process that occurs within the colon can allow the production of these nutrients called short-chain fatty acids that are a nutritional source. And increasingly, we realize those products can actually have an influence on the rest of the body as well. So I'm not trying to make this dense or complicated, but I just want you to realize that this microbiome is doing things within the large intestine, and they're beneficial to you. So the other aspects of it that's interesting, the microbiome, is that in the first year or 2 of life, the presence of those bacteria allows us to be tolerant of certain bacteria throughout our lifetime. That first year or 2 of life is a time when our immune system is developing, and this microbiota interacts with the immune system and allows our immune system to develop a degree of tolerance. So later in life, we don't have unusual allergies or have unusual reactions to food. So that first year or 2 of life, those bacteria are sort of modulating our immune system, teaching, if you will, which things are acceptable and which foods will be tolerated in the future. You might say where it comes from. Well, it comes from your mother mainly, and some from your father, and
the immune system has to tolerate the bacteria themselves.
Yeah, exactly. So these bacteria, they live within your colon, and you reach a happy sort of understanding with your immune system. The immune system tolerates these bacteria, does not attack them, but at the same time helps confine them to the confines of the colon itself, so that it doesn't lead to any kind of infection, nor does it lead to any kind of local inflammation. For example, if you cut your hand almost immediately, within a day or 2, it'll start getting red and irritated, and that's because the result of germs working through the break in the skin. And but that doesn't really happen within the GI tract itself. So there's no inflammation occurring on any usual basis. Now, that microbiota, as I said, it comes from the mother. And typically you get that when you're born in utero, and there are no bacteria within the uterus. It's only when you're delivered through a vaginal delivery do you get a good old shot of microbiome from your mother. And then as through making a sort of passage through the vaginal canal, children who are born by C-section, it takes a little bit longer for them to accumulate the microbiome from their mother as a result of interaction through breastfeeding and contact with skin and so forth. And so there's some thought that perhaps that might be an impact, although the research on that is ongoing at this point. So you accumulate this microbiome in early life, and it helps, we believe, now potentially influence your overall health through your adult life. Because increasingly what we're noticing is that there's a certain balance of bacteria that occur in healthy adults. But what we're noticing with certain conditions, these bacteria within the colon are altered. And there's increasing belief and understanding that these alterations may actually be the basis for these illnesses. And for right now, there's, I'll just go through some of the different medical conditions that have been investigated. Irritable bowel syndrome is one, inflammatory bowel disease is another, metabolic syndrome or diabetes and obesity are other conditions where there's a profound alteration in these bacteria within the colon that have been demonstrated. Coronary artery disease, heart attacks has been also associated with that, as well as certain neurological conditions, such as autism, have been potentially associated with an alteration in the bacteria within the colon. And you might say, well, gosh, that's a big list. How in the world could all these different things be influenced by that microbiota?
Or is one causing, which is causing what?
Well, and that's the trouble. You don't know whether the microbiota is causing these illnesses or whether the illnesses are occurring and in turn influencing the microbiota. So it's not clear whether it's a cause or an effect that you're experiencing. So,
well, we're gonna take a short break so that we can go to a commercial, and we'll be back very shortly. Talk more about the microbiome.
Thinking of buying a home located in a golf course community in the Naples, Marco, Bonita, or Estero, Florida? Here is what Mark Lai, former PGA winner, says about Realtor Michael York of the York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty.
Hi, I'm Mark Lai. If you have any real estate needs in Naples, Florida, the one company to contact is the York Real Estate Group. Also, if you want a golf course property to invest in, Michael York of the York Real Estate Group is the guy to contact. Michael knows every golf course in Naples. I will tell you this, he's been in the golf business for a long time. He's played all the great golf courses down here, and he is an outstanding realtor. I've known him for quite some time, and he's he's got a lot of integrity, and he very much knows his stuff on all the different clubs here in Naples. So the York Real Estate Group is a great place to start. So if you have any time or anybody that wants to visit down here in Naples and look at the options out there, please contact the York Real Estate Group.
Welcome back to Dialogue with the Doctor. We're talking with Dr. Raymond Phillips, a practicing gastroenterologist in Naples, about the microbiome of the gut, which is very complicated and very interesting.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks, great. Yeah, it's a really terrifically interesting because for years and years, we really did have an incomplete understanding of the microbiome, and even now our understanding is very, very incomplete. As I said a moment ago, there's this potential connection where alterations in the microbiome may be leading to medical illnesses. And as I just mentioned, these are some of the major epidemics across the United States. Obesity, diabetes, coronary artery disease. We had talked in a previous show about treatment of recurrent Clostridia difficile, which is a major epidemic across the United States right now. But the potential of being able to influence these other conditions and prevent major public health issues from ever developing is quite an exciting area. And so a tremendous amount of research is beginning on these areas, but I want to emphasize the word beginning. And it's going to take some time to really investigate and to pin down, these connections. Now, often people become terribly enthusiastic about these new developments in medicine and science, and because of that interest, there's often, well, you see it in the daily newspapers, New York Times or Wall Street Journal or Washington Post, is that, well, there'll be items in terms of discussion, the merits of in New York Times in October, there was an item talking about whether you should bank your stool as a way of, in case you encounter a catastrophic illness and you need to reestablish a normal microbiome. And then there's a discussion most recently that New York Times seems to emphasize this a great deal for some reason. But there's another article just this past week looking into the issue of this phenomena of using this nonprofit called the Open Biome Project that developed it at MIT, where they actually bank stool and now have developed a way of providing that stool transplantation or stool for research in a capsule form. So these are developments, and you'll hear more and more about these developments. But it's important to realize that the research is ongoing. Having said that, people, want to take charge. They want to take charge of their health. They want to see what they can do in a positive way to influence their health. And so inevitably now the issues have looked at, well, what can we do to influence the microbiome in a positive way? And obviously we've been doing that for years and years as far as doing things using like antibiotics and so forth. And antibiotics, of course, are they're a very, very blunt tool, because not only do they kill the potential infection we're interested in, that's say a pneumonia, but it'll kill off many of the bacteria within the colon. And as a result, it can sometimes have a negative influence on over the overall bacterial population, the overall microbiome. As we talked about before, that can lead to a Clostridia difficile infection. It's been noticed in animals that using antibiotics has been known for years, that giving animals antibiotics will oftentimes lead to increases in weight of the animals, particularly cattle, as well as chickens and so forth. And in animal husbandry, that's been used for years as a way of enhancing the animal's weight. And as a result, there's been some widespread use of antibiotics for years and years.
So antibiotics cause obesity in humans?
Well, there is some thought that antibiotics timed at an early stage in life could potentially cause obesity in the first years of life. Depending on the antibiotics you receive in the first year or two, might, as I said, it's a time when the microbiome was developing, and some epidemiological studies are suggesting that antibiotics in that first year or two might predispose a child to developing obesity later in life. But humans are long-lived, and to do studies like this over a period of time will take years and years. And as I said a moment before, people are very much wanting to take charge now, and as a result, they're looking around and see what kind of tools can be used to help influence their health now. And that's why interest in things like well, there's this concept of prebiotics, which are certain foods that favorably enhance the microbiota. And there have been a number of different foods that have been looked at, like artichokes or garlic or leeks and so forth. The science behind that, there's no real systematic research. It's more anecdotal than anything else. Then, of course, you have the issue of probiotics. That is to say, bacteria that have been used to favorably influence the microbiota.
Well, we hear the term probiotic daily everywhere in the health food stores, and I'd like to hear more about that, what your opinion is about probiotics after a short break, if that's okay with you.
Sure,
So
sure.
we'll be back in just a moment.
Thinking of buying or selling a home in Naples, Marco, Bonita, or Estero, Florida? Think of the most experienced York Real Estate Group associated with the #1 brokerage in Naples, Downing Fry Realty, which produced $1.9 billion in sales in 2014, controlling 43% of all transactions in Naples. Jim, Michael, and Morgan York make up the York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty. With over $250 million in sales transactions, they can offer you the expertise and trust you want and need in a realtor. Call them today at 239-273-6727 or visit their website, www.naplesyorkrealestate.com.
Welcome back to Dialogue with the Doctor. We are here with Dr. Raymond Phillips, a practicing gastroenterologist, and a good one, I might add. We're talking about microbiome of the gut, the bacterial population and the genetic population, DNA of the gut. And we're going to talk about probiotics, which everybody thinks is great, but may or may not be great.
Well, the concept of probiotics was first put forward by Eli Metchnikoff in 1907. And he was a microbiologist, won the Nobel Prize at the time for his research in immunology. And he proposed that by taking orally certain microbes, bacteria, you could influence favorably the bacteria within the colon, influence the microbiome. And for years, thousands of years, probiotics have been used in the form of yogurt, where you get a culture of an organism depending on the particular animal that provides the milk for it, be it a goat or a cow or if you're a Mongol, a horse. But then nonetheless, you can have fermentation of that product, and you can get this product called yogurt, which would be then a probiotic. And it's thought that it could have a beneficial effect. And then, as this has been looked at in more detail, the notion is that different types of bacterial populations, principally Bifidobacter or Lactobacillus, have been most associated with beneficial effects in terms of reduction of bloating or intestinal gas or diarrhea or constipation. The trouble with this area is that the manufacturers of probiotics, they come in the category of food supplement or food. And because of regulations and because of laws passed in the 1930s, food supplements, nutritional supplements, dietary supplements, they're not under the regulation of the Food and Drug Administration. And there is no requirement for the FDA to regulate this at all. And the only requirement is for the manufacturer of these products to volunteer if their product might potentially have an adverse effect. And as you might suspect, most manufacturers are fairly slow to volunteer that their product may not have a beneficial effect. And certainly there's no obligation on behalf of the manufacturers to demonstrate efficacy or effectiveness of their product. But nonetheless, small studies have been done showing that Bifidobacter and Lactobacillus can have a benefit in terms of, in the context of antibiotic-related diarrhea or individuals with irritable bowel syndrome in terms of moderating their symptoms. Then we've got devolved into a conversation about, well, how many bacteria should be present in a probiotic? And well, the notion is there should be lots, just because there's a lot of bacteria within your colon. And so this notion of billions and billions. But individuals need to realize that a probiotic is a bacteria. And if it's not treated carefully, it may not be viable when you take it. The other difficulties related to this bacteria is that there's no requirement for the manufacturer to demonstrate that the probiotic can traverse the acid environment of the stomach or make its way down to the colon and establish any kind of meaningful presence there. So it's not really, and then it's all together not clear, the manufacturers have not really demonstrated that once you purchase it, it'll remain viable in your medicine chest for a week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks. The other difficulty with probiotics is that, as I said, they're bacteria, they're living organisms, and oftentimes they've not been carefully sequenced, genetic sequences, and sometimes these probiotics can actually carry antibiotic resistance and can on their genes and potentially be able to transmit this antibiotic resistance to other bacteria within the colon. So there's some potential downsides of using probiotics, and it's a frustrating area because since there's no incentive for the manufacturer to demonstrate effectiveness, and only disincentive to volunteer any kind of adverse events, the science in this area has not really moved forward that effectively, and only small studies and inconsistent studies, and it's very hard to really provide meaningful recommendations to a person. But having said that, in the context of irritable bowel syndrome, in the context of taking antibiotics, it may be worthwhile to take a probiotic for a limited period of time. You also need to realize these are germs, these are bacteria, and if you're immunosuppressed, like if you're older or have diabetes or you're taking any kind of medications that suppress your immune system, probably not a good idea to take more bacteria. And you might say, well, how do you define older here in Naples? Well, it's a little bit hard to say. It's a little bit hard to say. But as you get beyond the age of 65, what happens is your immune system becomes less and less capable of being able to attack and defeat bacterial populations. So if you're taking supplemental bacteria in the form of probiotics, it could be a potential downside. So great promise in the area of probiotics, but unrealized promise. And so now more and more attention's turning to this ultimate probiotic, that is to say, influencing the microbiome directly by doing a transplantation. As I said, it's an ecosystem. If you can replace it with a viable and healthy other ecosystem through a transplantation, then we may be able to directly influence specific illnesses, specific medical conditions. And that's where much of the research is concentrating right now. And so it's a great area of excitement. As I said a moment ago, most of the research in this has just been sort of occurred in the last 2 years, and intervention research is only in the last year or so. So lots to be learned. And we'll talk in just a short while more with our next show about the ultimate probiotic, that is to say, stool transplantations.
Yeah, stool transplants. Well, we will talk more about that
Okay.
in our next show, because it sounds very interesting.
All right.
Thank you for coming.
Well, thanks,
Really
Greg. Thanks, Greg. And I appreciate the opportunity to sort of give you a little review of some basic science, and we'll see if we can get some a little more insight here.
He will be back for another show.
Okay.
Thank you.